This episode of the Leap Forward podcast is brought to you by Bridge LT, leaders in conversational learning and innovation. Through AI role plays, technical simulators, and comprehensive training programs, Bridge LT is revolutionizing the future of corporate and enterprise education.
Today on Leap Forward, we welcome Justin Spooner, Director at Unthinkable Digital, drawing on his career in fine art, broadcast media, and cultural innovation. Justin shares his philosophy of collaborative intelligence, explaining how the future of work is not about single-player AI, but about multiplayer AI working within multidisciplinary teams to overcome siloed thinking. Let's explore how to design better intelligence.
So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome to this episode of Leap Forward, Justin Spooner. Justin, you are the founder or co-founder, I should say, of Unthinkable Digital. You, I suppose, have an incredible kind of career. I've known you for a long time. Why don't you sort of tell us a little bit about your journey with Unthinkable and before that?
Well, I'll start with a ridiculously early anecdote, just for the fun of it. My dad started a computer games company when I was about 11, and my living room was encircled by Spectrums and Commodores and Amigas, Commodore 64s and Amigas, and the whole panoply of different technology back in the 80s. And my brother and his friends were the coding team, and I was the user tester. So I have a weird feeling that it was written in the stars, and I couldn't really escape the fact that I would spend the rest of my life thinking about creativity and digital technology in quite a profound way, because it sort of entered my system when I was probably a vulnerable young person. And then, skipping many years, I did a fine art degree. And it was in the early 90s when very little technology was in art colleges. I was at Central St Martin's. Nowadays, it looks like a spaceship. It's so full of technology. But in those days, there was hardly a computer to be found. And so basically taught myself how to do all the computer stuff and learned how to do 3D rendering and all of that. And came out with a fine art degree where, not to put it, too rudely, but I reckon about 2/3 of it I'd probably just taught myself with my mates, how to do it, as was the way in those days. Somehow or other, this enabled me to go and join the BBC, and I spent 8 beautiful years doing what I think of as being my sort of pretend version of a master's in digital at the BBC. But weirdly, by the end of that 8th year, I'd been extraordinarily lucky and ended up getting a management job at 26, and had then done that same role almost every year for 8 years. I was like, okay, I think I know what this is about now. It was a really formative time. This is when Google appeared. This is when Facebook appeared. This is when the whole panoply of our sort of digital landscape started to appear, and obviously the BBC was trying to get its head around what we're supposed to do about it all, and it was obviously great fun. But then coming out of that, about 2008, started Unthinkable. Started it with some friends, and as you say, co-founded it with Matthew Shorter, and probably just gone on then to really focus on the application of digital technology, both strategically and in a sort of very grassrootsy making and development way for cultural organisations, for learning organisations, for charities. We're sort of very much leaning into probably what one might think of as the public sector. We very much embarked on that, and then I met you in my Future Learn period, where we endeavoured to create a really amazing UK MOOC platform, and had a lot of fun doing that. Met a lot of universities, did a lot of thinking with them about digital transformation. It was another one of those moments, a little bit like the BBC, where everyone was thinking about how on earth do we do this? What does this all mean? And actually, much of what we've done since has been the maturation of that kind of thinking, you know, the what comes next. But of course, what did come next was COVID, which then massively sped things up. It digital strategies appeared overnight in universities. In many ways, FutureLearn became a kind of beneficiary of COVID because everyone needed to jump online and do their learning online. And so there was a lot that was going on, quite a sort of both panicky, but also I now have faith that somehow in these crises we are able to do the kind of innovation that often we can't when the crisis is not upon us. There's a sort of slow-mo version of innovation that's happening all the time, but boy, did that speed things up. And then in the last few years, been doing loads of different work, working on AI prototypes with the Tate, and with Raspberry Pi Foundation, and with Microbit, and lots of work with the National Portrait Gallery, and a whole bunch of different really interesting organisations. Been working with the Royal College of Art on their global digital engagement strategy, and with the Creative Computing Institute on their strategy. So, just an absolutely exciting bunch of things to be thinking about.
I'd love to kind of understand a little bit about sort of like, I suppose, how you've got to that sort of point. You've got this amazing sort of, kind of, I suppose, sort of track record, and this idea of kind of blending creativity with learning and tech. How, describe a little bit about kind of the approach that you kind of take, and well, I suppose in a sense the question is, what's the recipe for your success?
Well, as I always say, a great deal of luck. That's the first thing to say. Being in the right place at the right time, which if people believe in making your own luck, which I slightly do, means trying to work out where the right place and the right time is so that you can appear somehow within it. I think that's a lot to do with listening to your passions, right? And understanding what makes you excited. I remember, meeting you early days at Future, although I had met you actually in your prior company before, and you were exuding excitement in both times. And I think it's because, perhaps similarly to me, I just don't think you would bother with things that aren't exciting you. Like you that sense of being led by the light towards things that are energetic and exciting, where great collaborations can take place, has always been what's driven me. And I think it's what's been driving you a lot of the time. And I think that I suppose the balancing act of maybe two opposing forces, one, an immense amount of skepticism and criticality, and on the other hand, a lot of positivity and optimism. And in other words, I don't think, although it's a bit of a close call, but I don't think I'm a techno-utopian, right? I don't believe that technology is a silver bullet. But what I do believe is that when humans think about how they want to make technology be in service of their own aims, right, then amazing things can happen. And so my feeling is that every project and every opportunity that comes our way is almost like, for me, selfishly, a little opportunity to edge along my thinking in that area. What's the amazing thing that could be achieved right now with this particular set of conditions?
Yeah, I think the point you make around being drawn to the light, I think, is a really good one. But equally, I think you're someone who I think and can see also almost creates the light themselves in whatever they're doing, and I think that's quite unique. So that perhaps that balance. When you were just talking, you're rattling off all sorts of incredible projects and brands, and I want to kind of zero in a bit sort of on that, I suppose. And so here we are, October 2025. You used the phrase AI, and of course, you've lived through this, hugely interesting and challenging kind of period of transformation in your career to date. Sort of what's what for you, kind of when you think about the projects and the challenges that your clients kind of are coming to you with today, what's changed most in the way that you or they think about transformation and collaboration?
Oh, you've just brought up my favorite word in the world. Yeah, so I think that there is a lot to think about in regards to collaboration, and I might sound like I'm getting on my pulpit for a minute, right? But what I would say is that the opportunities for really intelligent, really creative, really open-ended collaboration is quite amazing at the moment. This is a very amazing time for that. And this idea that, as leaders in organizations, you have this kind of combined intelligence, which is a kind of material that you can work with, in your organizations, is really profound, I think. And when we speak to a lot of leaders, they're often thinking about how can I better make use of this? And you'll have encountered this loads of times. The exact opposite of the thing they want is what I would call the siloed thinking, right? Where it's like, yeah, team A, I mean, they're all right. They're doing amazing stuff, but it seems quite insular. It seems a bit locked into team A. Team B, right, can never really get into team A. We can't really get these teams to like do stuff together. On top of that, in the very sort of contemporaneous period, I'd say maybe in the last year or two, this question about how organizations are thinking about artificial intelligence and the way that it affects productivity, right? I think that we've gone through an interesting sort of paradigm shift, and a little bit like where in 2023 there was a lot of, in the education scene, there was like, right, AI. Oh, it's like a thing that enables student cheating en masse, right? And then after a bit, they were like, oh, hold on. No, actually, it can help educators create really interesting materials. And so there was a kind of evolution of the thinking. I think where we're at now, we might be just before this, right? But I think where we're about to be is how can we combine multiple humans, multiple human intelligences, multiple artificial intelligences into a kind of combined collaborative intelligence? And without a doubt, that's the thing I'm sort of obsessed with at the moment. And, clients certainly have the things that they want doing, but every single time I'm thinking, yes, but also what about the collaborative intelligence that's at play here? How can that be better designed? How can we think about that in new ways? And we definitely can. What I would say is I would set that against slightly a kind of a view about the way AI products are being made at the moment, and you will have encountered this left, right, and center, is that they are, on the whole, single player, focused on individual productivity. In other words, it's not that there is collaborative intelligence. It's not that there is team productivity. It's that there are individuals apparently being 10x'd, and then they bring their 10x'd selves to the group, and then God knows what happens after that, but something very powerful occurs. I don't think so. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's not how it's going to work. Another thing that I live and breathe with, and I've got to say, like in my recent work with clients, so with Raspberry Pi recently, I did some lovely design sprint work with them, with these incredibly multidisciplinary teams. Oh my goodness, Justin, it was just the most delicious thing. You had educators, product people, engineers, visual designers, all coming together to think about a thing in the round. And not only that, making and using and thinking about AI in loads of different combinatorial forms. And it gave me that real sense of, yes, I think this is the way. I think this is the possibility space that we need to work with. So that's been my biggest thing, is multidisciplinarity, collaborative intelligence, and moving to a multiplayer form of AI rather than a single player form of it.
You often sort of talk about, alongside your kind of collaborative intelligence sort of philosophy, I suppose, about creating kind of like the right conditions for learning. And so, we just talked there about, building and developing, but the conditions for learning, so the end recipient, the user, or whatever you want to kind of, the learner, right? So, and you also talked a little bit about sort of, you weren't, despite the Spectrum and Commodores, you weren't in it for the tech, as it were. So, this isn't just about delivering for technology. This is about creating the conditions for learning. What does that mean in practice?
I think it means a few things. So again, the thing that I really don't want it to mean is, we've made some crazy new chatbots, right? Which mean that students are now learning on their own in a liaison with their chatbot, right? What I would like to see is we're still learning in groups, but one of the members of the group is an AI, right? In other words, the affordances of group learning, of social learning, should not be thrown away because, oh, right, now what we can have is super individualized learning. I was making a joke the other day, Justin, that I wonder if all the technology in the world is bringing us back to the Victorian governess, where it's like, okay, everyone gets their own personalized learning tutor. In many ways, it's the Sal Khan model, right? But no, we construct our understanding in dialogue, in relationship with other humans. Now, I'm not saying therefore you throw out the AIs. I'm saying the AIs play a role in that, right? They play a role in creating connectivity and translation layers between humans. They help different disciplines connect. They provide missing disciplines in our teams. We can't all be together in our groups. There are so many different ways in which this technology can still create the conditions for great learning experiences, except for when people have gone, oh, I've solved it. I got rid of all the people. I got rid of the teachers. I got rid of the peer learners. I got rid of even making stuff. That all just happens on the fly now when I press the AI button. Please no. Let's still be really conscious and purposeful about that stuff. But let's think about the incredible ways. I'll give you an example. Imagine that in the future you go and you're doing your online course and you're learning philosophy, and what happens is that there's 2 or 3 of you having humans having a debate with an AI, and it's role playing a particular position which all 3 of you are working with, right? I'm observing how the other people do it. It's interacting with all of us in different ways. We're all taking turns and learning that. We're all building on each other's arguments. This is my vision for how. No, it's not my vision. It's a vision that I hold incredibly dear about those kind of conditions for learning, thinking about the affordances of new technology.
And I think, to your point, I was chatting to someone the other day about exactly this, which is that, kind of the role of AI and sort of, what he was saying was, he sees AI as playing this role where it then gives us the time to actually have, as humans, right? And so it enables us to arrive at, at that place to have that discussion better informed. And so it's sort of an enabler of that kind of human kind of interaction, which, he, as you believes is fundamental to, and he was citing even kind of real world events like, the things like the Oasis concert, right? As an example of kind of bringing people back together and that being critical in terms of, culture and development in some ways. Tell me more about kind of that sort of process of trying to sort of establish the balance between tech and the messy creativity of human collaboration.
Well, it's been one of those weird things that I've been obsessing about for more time than would be appropriate to talk about. But probably 15, 20 years I've been obsessing about this. We were making the joke the other day. Do you remember that a while ago you used to make slides on your own? And it was on your local machine, right? And then when you wanted to show someone else, you had to send them the file, and then they opened it up, and then chaos ensued, right? But interestingly, the kind of the surfaces that we now use, so if I pick on Google Slides for a moment, you know how we very quickly assimilate these things. I mean, it doesn't seem like magic anymore, but only 5 minutes ago, the idea of saying, oh, let's make a slide deck together in a synchronous and asynchronous mix would have been preposterous, But in now having that kind of multiplayer surface, and we have them all over the place. I mean, in a way, Slack and messaging is a form of it. The whole Google suite is a version of it. Miro is the poster child of it. It's like, oh my goodness, oozing. This idea of the kind of collaborative interconnectivity of different humans. But the worry, if you like, or the kind of thing that you have to have in the back of your mind is, have I just changed the way I think because of the tools? Have I sort of become sublimated into the tool paradigm? Or are there kind of human characteristics about the way that we collaborate and work that are serviced by our technologies? Am I doing that? Am I making choices? And I think, one of the things that I would recommend anyone do, and I try and do it, but it is a struggle, is that you need playtime you need to play with whatever those tools are, right? So to pick Miro, for example, I don't know if you saw, but earlier on this week, they launched an absolute smorgasbord of new AI features and into their Canvas space. Absolutely amazing. They have a thing called sidekicks, which is very similar to the thing that I know and love. It's like this idea that there are these AI, I'm going to call them beings, for want of a better word,
Yeah.
that are interacting with the humans, right? Exactly as I'm describing. But you need to play with that, right? And not only that, the way that you do it and the way that I do it, they don't even need to be the same. We need to find our culturally different ways of using these tools that fit for the tasks at hand. What I think we don't want is what I would call sort of the overly productized solution, which is, and I don't think of tech companies and think, oh, they're terrible and evil because they're productizing things. They're trying to work out a way to make something real and place it into the marketplace, right? But oftentimes the paradigms are so strong that the humans acquiesce to them. They're like, I have to do it like the way the tool says, right? And this is what I'm saying. I'd say hold on all the time to the idea that you're in control. And the way that I would do that is play, muck about, try it this way, try it that way, discard that concept, play around with that one, get some friends in and play with it in this particular way. I think it's only through that sense of moving away from an almost religious reverence of the technologies into a I am mucking about mode with these technologies, that we start to feel like I've got the right to control these tools. I've got an idea about how it's meant to be. Everyone does. It's just that often they don't believe that they do.
I love this concept of play, and I think again going back to your kind of early years, in terms of gaming, and obviously I know through your career you've done some amazing stuff, kind of in that sector.
Yeah.
Kind of let's talk about kind of a little bit about sort of how important and what the concept of kind of play means for you today in the way that you kind of approach your practice.
Again, unthinkable. I'm super lucky to be surrounded by some extremely lovely and playful humans, so that helps. But I love the idea of. I often find myself, because I'm now elderly and been around long enough, that I often, it's like, oh, Justin's leading this project, so I've got that kind of sense of like setting the culture for a particular project, right? And my general thing that I like to do, there's two things really. One is I don't really like anything to feel like it's settled too soon. So like if there are any assumptions, let's just go, oh yeah, all right. We notice that there is this assumption, right? And we're even sort of aware that we might collapse to that assumption, right, quite quickly. So we're like, right, let's be on guard for like, oh no, we're not just going for the obvious or the easiest, or the things that feel automatic. So there's that. And how do we get away from that? Well, let's play around with ideas. Let's muck about with them. Let's diagrammatize this way. Let's try this way. Let's prototype something up over this way. Even when we've prototyped it, I must be so annoying to clients regularly. Where I'm just like, yeah, but still, let's keep some fluidity to this. Why don't we imagine the thing beyond this one and see where that might take us? In other words, this resistance to things settling down, right? And this idea of there being a kind of pliability. In a way, I think play, we've all experienced this, haven't we? If you play with very pliable systems, then so many different outcomes can emerge from it. If you play in highly constrained and brittle systems, you're like, after a bit, you're like, well, it only really seems to do X, Y, or Z, and I can't make it do anything else. And I feel like I've explored that, right? If we're being a little bit more hyperbolic about it, what I would basically say is that play is the way that you interact with the design space, right? The design space is nigh on infinite, right? But we've got to play our way around it. A good way to think about that, I think, sometimes is I'm over here in this zone. Often the way that we'll get to another zone is by linearly moving towards a sequence of ideas towards that other place. Don't bother with that. Just appear in the other space, and then you can work your way backwards. So you might go, right, forget those ideas for a minute. Let's pop up here and try this other idea that's miles away, right? Again, I have to say, a lot of this is to do with confidence, right? And you just want, you want your 22-year-old out of college, you want your 50-year-old, slightly arrogant, white, balding male like myself, and you want everyone else to feel a sense of permission to play. And that comes from the confidence. And we should all feel that confidence that we can muck around and try things out.
It's a great way of framing it. And when you're kind of working with organizations on sort of, helping them adapt sort of new collaborative practice, what are the kind of cultural barriers that appear most often?
Oh my goodness. There's a lot of classics, aren't there? So I'd say two are special. One is specialism silos. Two is hierarchical permission, like where I was a minute ago. I'll come back to these a bit more deeply. Three is personality and confidence. And also, I don't think we're really taught to play. I'm using play as an all-encompassing verb for this thing, right? Imagine if I said to you, Justin, right, there's a thing that we need to solve. There's like a whole number of ways that we might go about that, right? And often people lock themselves into, what I can do is think about it through my professional lens, through this kind of quite narrow band way of thinking about that thing. And I think oftentimes when we're working with organizations, I quite like people to just go, can you just step away from your professional persona? Imagine it was just you. Imagine it was just a bunch of us. Well, I mean, it is a bunch of us, right? So it's not hard to imagine. It's just a bunch of us, right? And there were, that thing that you mucked about with at breakfast this morning before you left, the room, like that's all part of your experience. Bring all of that, So that's one of the things I think. And I think the specialism silos is really tricky, right? In many ways, I think digital grew a whole bunch of specialisms in order that it could be taken seriously in a world that it was trying to transform. So in a way, the product, the UX, the user research, all of these things became solidified quite quickly in order to feel organizationally safe, right? The problem with them is that they also start to narrow what apparently it is that you're allowed to do and think within the bounds of that role. And what I would say is that anyone whose job, who's got a job title like that, it's like, yeah, that's the thing that you're trying to achieve, but you also have to bring all of that other stuff, which makes you the special version of that thing. That's what makes you that broad. We often talk about that T shape, don't we? Right? Let's get you into a T shape. You've got depth, but you've got breadth, right? And then with hierarchies, often people think, do you know what? The thing about getting over hierarchical problems is by the senior folk changing their mindsets and being, creating a better permission space. And that is partly true. But what I would also say is I would advocate for the younger people and the more junior people to be more difficult, to be more upstart, to suggest the what if, to critique, to do Emperor's New Clothing, just to do it, right? Because it's not just about setting permissions. It's also about creating counterfactuals and like arguing against the prevailing default thinking, and younger people can absolutely do that. So it doesn't take a lot, I think, to create those conditions from both ends.
When you're thinking about sort of the future of collaboration, and to your point, from an organizational point of view, it's becoming more distributed, and more AI literate. What do you think the next decade of collaboration is going to look like?
I can't help myself being a bit of a used car salesman here. I'm slightly plugging, my obsession with this concept of collaborative intelligence. But
yeah,
and I would certainly love people who want to come and talk about that more to come and chat with me. But I think that we are going to. I had a bit of a thesis building up over the last little while around how I feel collaboration is going to play out, and sort of around a number of different approaches. One approach is around this idea of extending our multidisciplinarity. Let's bank the idea that multidisciplinary teams are amazing. They definitely are, right? But do you know what? we don't always have the availability of all of those disciplines. And so there's a lot of ways, I think, in which our AI tools can help us extend the range of our multidisciplinarity, right? And I think that's a really important thing to think about. A good example would be a whole bunch of people are thinking about a great new product idea, but there's no marketing person there. They didn't get invited. Who knows why? It's a slip up. Or it might be, it's just in that company, it's not possible to get the marketing people into that product thinking meeting. This isn't culturally it's unacceptable, right? But imagine if you had an AI who was postulating questions and reminding people about certain affordances of marketing and about the way of thinking about how people perceive new services and products. And so they've extended the multidisciplinarity of that thinking, right? And I think that's a really critical one. Another one, which I think we're going to increasingly run into, is that different disciplines struggle to understand each other. And again, if there's one thing I think you can say about the way that the AI personality is sort of encoded in large language models, is that it's like a hyper generalist. So it can basically, it can create, I think, kind of translation bridges, hooks and connectors between different disciplines in very interesting ways. I've seen it happen firsthand.
Yeah.
I think there's a thing around sequencing intelligence that is going to radically change. So, like, for example, one of the things that artificial intelligence is really good at is creating a lot of ideas, right? A lot of senior figures don't like that. They won't be confused by a bundle of ideas. But you can now imagine a sort of productive sequencing of intelligence where a number of humans and artificial intelligences get together and produce an absolute panoply of ideas, which are then sort of filtered and analyzed down, So you've got a lot, I'd call it sometimes evolutionary design practice, a lot of ideas which then get filtered down by various pressures and then rebuilt up again and then filtered down, right? And I think that this whole way of imagining a sequence of flows for that creative process, for that sort of generative thinking process, they are going to be really, really important. So, the idea, for example, that you might have, a biologist and a poet and a philosopher and a visual designer and a tech engineer working with a couple of AIs to generate visuals and sort of product ideas en masse, right? Almost slightly with a kind of emotionless vibe about them. They're no one's baby yet, right? No one's obsessing about that. Oh, look at that one. Oh, look at that one. Or let's see if we can get 10 more of those, right? And then like a whole new process that sits over the top of that of analysis, connecting it to wider market research and so on. I think that intelligence sequencing is going to become really, really important.
When you think about sort of leadership and how that needs to evolve, what are the kind of skills or mindsets that are going to kind of become essential?
I think, in a way, I was pondering this the other day. I mean, first off, I feel sort of sorry for people in positions of leadership at the moment. It's like, whoa, what a horribly challenging time. Because the prevailing narrative over the last little while has been this idea that, every organization needs to be, using AI to up the productivity of their companies. And the board's like, well, what are you doing? CEO, what are you doing? Tell me what your plan is. It's not so straightforward, right? And I think that one of the things that needs to happen is almost like the prototyping of that kind of collaborative intelligence, of that intelligence sequencing. In other words, we've got to try some different methodologies for thinking, for creative thinking in our organizations. And I think what that means is that any kind of leader that you are, please don't think this is an IT thing. Don't think it's a product thing. Think it's a people thing, and then get involved, get your hands dirty, right? Suggest to your head of HR, your head of people, that there'll be some sessions that talk about how we're going to improve our collaborative intelligence in this organization. Have teams come up with propositions about how that will work. Hear them out. Create a forum where those ideas can flood in. Get some prototypes of those processes running. Ethan Mollick recently did, maybe about a year ago, did his big piece of research on Procter & Gamble and looked at the way in which the use of AI in product generation changed. In that he got like another team to assess the ideas, and it turned out that people that were using AI had ideas that were being better voted for by those those people, right? But that's not nearly the end of it. That's the beginning of it. That's sort of like the table stakes, right? The end of it is that leaders are like, there's a profoundly different way that we need to utilize and make the value of our combined intelligence work in this place that apparently I am leading, right? And it's not, what I mean is I don't think it's a thing that can be dodged. I think it's a thing that you have to engage in. If I was a senior leader, I'd be like, I want you all to be coming to tell me, all you different groups, how that collaborative intelligence is working, right? How we're using the combined insights from artificial intelligence and our human expertise. I don't want you to just turn it into AI. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the really intriguing combination of these things. So, partly it's about a little bit of letting go that some of the methodologies and some of the mindset around this might no longer be fit for purpose, And I will just say, Justin, that whenever I see, and I do like every day, you'll see it on LinkedIn, this idea that we're 10xing the productivity of individuals, right? It makes me feel quite sick. It's like, first off, whatever made you think that it was about a load of genius individuals in combination in ranked order that was making the company work? No, not at all. Anyway, that's my take on it.
And I think that's a hill you're going to die on, and I respect you for that. So what excites you the most about where this is heading, and what kind of keeps you up at night?
Well, it's funny actually. I had a weird sensation the other night because I was mucking about with Miro on my iPad and testing Sidekicks, which is their new sort of little AI beings. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, Microsoft are about to, launch that their new version of a desktop where you basically speak to it and it does things. There's a sort of weird kind of invocational magic that's sort of emerging, right? And I have this sort of feeling that the transformative effects of the surface level of the technology is going to be utterly profound. I think people are going to be genuinely weirded out by like the affordances of these technologies in 2026. It's almost like, do you remember in 2023 there was an immense crisis and panic, especially in the education sector, and then they were like, oh good, we've written our policies now and it's all done. And then in 2024 they were like, oh, it's not all done. It's actually quite it's quite challenging, and it's like going to be with us here to stay. So I think there's something about an openness to this kind of almost continuous change, but with a sense of it's not no one. You don't need to feel as a leader, I don't think that you're going to be left behind. I think you need to just create a bit of space in your life. I've spoken to a few leaders about this who genuinely feel like they're getting left behind. You just need to create a bit of space for playtime, right? It's okay for a CEO, COO, CTO, all of those people to not know what the actual answer is and to re-engage with the materiality of it, right? So that is one thing I would say is really exciting. Like, it's genuinely exciting. I don't dismiss the incredibly important arguments there are against AI and questions around our over-reliance on it, energy use, all of those things. But I think we need to forge our balanced view through that, and I think I think personally there's something very exciting to be done here. I think in terms of what keeps me up is well, weirdly I sleep badly anyway, so I have a weird sense of anxiety about things. I have a feeling that the thing that most is problematic at the moment is a sense of overwhelm. I think that it's extremely easy for us all to go under the overwhelm bus. Under the overwhelm bus. Well, that's a weird phrase, isn't it? And I think the key thing here is, I don't know if you remember, there was this amazing piece of work in the Royal College, 10, 15 years ago, where this young student tried to recreate a toaster. I don't know if this rings a bell, but this piece of work was about how could a person create physically all the parts that would create a working toaster, right? And the answer is no. It's insanely hard. we cannot know how all these things work. This is the madness of it, right? What we can know is only what we can know. It's not that you're trying to understand all the things, you're just trying to understand the things that you can understand, right? Which is a very, very slim subset. But you know what? You knowing that in your mind and flavored by all of the kind of experience and creativity you have adds something else, right? It's not nothing. It absolutely adds something else. But can you keep on top of it all? No. Don't even try. Not necessary, right? Does that mean that you're going to look like a fool in front of others? Don't worry about it. We all look like fools these days. That's the state of being, right? But do take a position, just your position, try the things that you tried. Tell them about that thing that you tried last Wednesday, right? And what you felt about that and what worried you about it and what was exciting about it for you. But without a doubt, I get troubled by that sense of overwhelm. I sometimes have to say to everyone, on an Unthinkable course, I am right on the edge of the overwhelm today. And then we have like a calm down moment. But yeah, that's my biggest fear.
And just to wrap up, one last question, which is, what is one book, tool, or practice that you'd recommend for anyone wanting to work more collaboratively?
Well, I might have to sneak in a couple of things, as in using your set of categories. Anyone that knows me, and it's now become a laughing thing, knows that I am obsessed with Miro. Not only is it obviously a great tool, but do you know what I think it really is? It's a way of understanding a new paradigm for working. So weirdly, I was obsessing about how this kind of form of collaborative intelligence could actually practically work. And when I saw the launch event at Canvas 25, I thought, it's almost like all of the things that were occupying me have somehow made their way into that tool, right? And so I would say it's not even just like, oh, Miro's a good, like Photoshop's a great tool or Miro's a great. It's not so much that. It's more that in using Miro, you get to play in a different paradigm than the usual paradigm. And there's something about that. You're talking about the play space. You suddenly go, oh, right, yeah. So we could do synchronous collaboration like this, and we could do asynchronous like this, and then we could do sequence intelligence like this, and we could bring in our different multidisciplinary thinking like this. And weirdly, that Canvas model, it actually enables that to happen. So that'd be like my tool. And then just in terms of a kind of various, I wasn't doing a fair bit of reading around this at the moment, but this will be no surprise. But I think that the Co-Intelligence book by Ethan Mollick is a really lovely grounding in, I think, the paradigm shift that we're all gonna be grappling with in the next little while. And I worry actually that our Unthinkable Collaborative Intelligence is very close to Ethan Mollick's Co-Intelligence. But you know what? My one major critique of him, of the book, is that it so focuses on individual with individual AI, right? Which probably was exactly right for the time that he was writing the book. And it doesn't explore that concept of the team and the enhanced team with AI. But that's good, because it's leaving a space for us to think about that. Thank goodness he hasn't written that book. He's probably on it on the minute. But so that would be the book that I think I would go to.
Brilliant way to end. Justin, thank you so much for joining us on Leap Forward. It's been fascinating hearing your philosophy and the way that you help the organizations think differently. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. And as I said, if anyone wants to explore collaborative intelligence in a bit more depth with me, there's a way that you can do that on our website. Just come and visit and we'll have a chat for free.
Thank you.